In your memoir, who is your narrator? Who is actually telling you the story? Thought it was me. It is. Just what version of you? What do you mean? Do you really think you stay the same person throughout your life? More on this coming up. And if you'd like a free class on memoir writing, be sure to click on the link in the description right below this video. See you in a sec. A lot of memoirs actually have two different narrators, and both of them are you. So I'm not trying to make some grand philosophical argument about the nature of self and who you really are and these two sides to your personality. Rather, this is a really practical decision you're going to need to make when it comes to writing your memoir. And the question you need to ask yourself is, are you writing your memoir from the point of view of the person you are now? Are you looking back on your life and telling us a story filtered through your point of view, through who you have become? Or rather, are you going to tell us a story from the point of view of the younger you, the person who actually lived through these events? So these are two completely different narrators, and they will tell the story in a different way. So if you want to tell the story about getting picked on when you were in high school, a 60-year-old narrator, if you're 60 years old now and you're looking back on it, you're going to tell the story in such a different way than that 15-year-old who actually got picked on. So let me give you an example of what I call using the older, wiser narrator. So this is the person you are now reflecting back and telling the story from the point of view of the person you have become. So this is the older you, this is the person you are now. This is an example from Somebody's Daughter by Ashley C. Ford, and she's recalling being 4 years old, but you can tell this isn't a 4-year-old who's writing this. This is told from the perspective of the person she has become. When I was 4 years old, I taught myself to lie awake until morning. I wanted the sunrise, and I only had to stay awake to have her. When children are small, our desires seem small, even when we want the sky. Anything we want seems to be only a matter of time and effort away. It's too early to imagine what's already holding you back. So here, obviously, these last few sentences, she's obviously telling us from the point of view of being an adult, of being a much older person than she was when she was 4 years old. And the advantage of this is that she can add extra insight. A 4-year-old is not going to know what she doesn't know, right? It's too early to imagine what's holding you back, she says. When we're 4 years old, we don't have the benefit of hindsight. We don't really understand what we want in the context of things that we will want later, in the context of things that will happen to us. We don't have that insight. We don't have that hindsight. Let me keep reading. I'd been enraptured with a storybook about the cycle of the sun. I remember looking on in awe as my teacher outstretched her right arm, extending it as far as she could, her fingers spread for the illusion of an extra inch. Her left arm moved out and away from her body, though not as far as its opposite, still close enough to read from the book she held. It was a simple and sad attempt to describe the sheer enormity of a life-supporting star to a pre-K classroom. Okay, so here, what I find really interesting is that she's actually siding with the teacher, even though she's a 4-year-old in this class, because she's writing this from the point of view of the person she has become, of the person she is now. She's an adult, and she actually sides with this teacher. She empathizes with this poor teacher trying to impart knowledge to a bunch of little kids who don't really care. One more paragraph for you. So when you tell your story from the point of view of the person you are now, it has the advantage of being able to add hindsight, insight, to reflect on your story in a way that you wouldn't have been able to give us thoughts that you wouldn't have had at the time. So you can also use what I call a present-day narrator to tell your story. And the present-day narrator is the person you once were, the person who actually lived through events. And the advantage of using a present-day narrator is that it really puts your reader there with you. We really feel like we're living through this event with you as you go through it. Let me give you an example. This is from Angela's Ashes by Frank McCourt. I try to get the swing going myself, but all I can do is move it back and forth. And I'm angry because Freddie and Malachi are laughing at the way I can't swing. They're great pals now. Freddie, 7, Malachi, 2. They laugh every day, and Malachi's tongue gets better with all the laughing. When he laughs, you can see how white and small and pretty his teeth are, and you can see his eyes shine. He has blue eyes like my mother. He has golden hair and pink cheeks. I have brown eyes like Dad. I have black hair and my cheeks are white in the mirror. My mother tells Mrs. Leibowitz down the hall that Malachi is the happiest child in the world. She tells Mrs. Leibowitz down the hall, Frankie has the odd manner like his father. I wonder what the odd manner is, but I can't ask because I'm not supposed to be listening. Now, do you see how different that feels? This really is the point of view of a child. He doesn't have the insight of an adult. These are his thoughts. So this isn't really the voice of a 4-year-old, but it's the literary version. This is a very young voice. This sounds like a child, the way a child would think. This child does not have the insight of an adult. This child talks about his brother as an older brother. He sees his brother as actually being older. He doesn't look back on the past and see his brother as a child. I want you to pay attention to the last sentence here. I wonder what the odd manner is, but I can't ask because I'm not supposed to be listening. So again, we get that point of view of a child. I'm not supposed to be listening. Just to give you a sense of how this would be different, if this had been written from the point of view of an older, wiser narrator, I did just a super fast rewrite on the last paragraph. This is how an older, wiser narrator might narrate this book. In that moment, I wonder what the odd manner is, what my mother means by this. She will repeat it time and time again when she thinks I'm not listening. Once in 7th grade, another time behind my back at high school graduation. I will begin to understand what the odd matter means with time. It means I am never asked to play soccer with Marcus Shore, that I am the one not invited to Sarah Jane's birthday parties. So with the older, wiser narrator, you also have the benefit of time. You're not limited to being 4 years old. You can look back on different time periods and compare it to what is happening in this scene. So that's another advantage of using the older, wiser narrator. So both of these techniques have their advantages and disadvantages. And that brings me to the question, so can you have both narrators in the same memoir? And the answer is yes. So it's actually not problematic to have 2 points of views happening in the same story. And you'll go in and out of these points of views and your reader probably won't even notice. In fact, it can actually add a lot of richness to your story. Let me give you an example. This is an excerpt from Know My Name by Chanel Miller. And I want you to notice how she goes in and out. Sometimes it's from the point of view of the older, wiser narrator. And very often when she's in the scene, it's told from the point of view of the person who actually lived through the event. I pulled down my new pants, eyes half closed, went to pull down my underwear. My thumbs grazed the sides of my thighs, touching skin, catching nothing. Odd. I repeated the motion. I flattened my hands to my hips, rubbed my palms along my thighs, as if they'd materialize, rubbing and rubbing until heat was created, and then my hands stopped. I did not look down, just stood there frozen in my half squat. I crossed my hands over my stomach, half bent over in complete stillness like that, unable to sit, unable to stand, pants around my ankles. In this paragraph, she's telling this from the point of view of the person who actually lived through this event. These are the thoughts that went through her head at the time. What I want you to notice is how this shifts, how her point of view shifts in the next paragraph. I always wondered why survivors understood other survivors so well. Why, even if the details of our attacks vary, survivors can lock eyes and get it without having to explain. Perhaps it is not the particulars of the assault itself that we have in common, but the moment after, the first time you are left alone, something slipping out of you. Where did I go? What was taken? So initially, we get the point of view of the person who actually lived through the sexual assault. And then we have the older, wiser narrator chiming in and reflecting on these events. So it's a really great way to tell your story is in the scene itself, you tell the story from the point of view of the person who went through these things. You can also intersperse this with your older, wiser narrator chiming in. It's almost like they're two people having a conversation, but your reader doesn't feel that way. It feels quite seamless actually, and it really works. It's a great way to tell your story. So the good news is you have lots of choices when it comes to telling your story. You can tell the story from the point of view of the person who lived through the events. You can tell the story from the point of view of the person you are now. You have lots of choices. What is my personal preference? If you ask me if I want chocolate or vanilla, I'll usually tell you I want a swirl. Now, actually, I'm going to ask you if you have butter pecan or chocolate chip mint. And if you don't, then I will settle for a swirl. So I think we're actually now talking about ice cream and not memoir writing. If you want to learn more about how to write your memoir, click on the link in the description right below this video and you'll get access to a free 7-part class. Also, it would be very nice of you if you would hit like or subscribe. Take care, guys.